Hi, my name's Pauline Glamourchak, and I need to testify about my near-death experience. Uh, I had, I've had several, but I had a particularly profound one in 1977, in which I promised that I would testify. That promise was greeted with a bit of amusement, or quite a bit of amusement, but a confirmation that it would be pleasing. So my testimony has been unbelieved for 42 years now, and that's got to do with the fact that, first of all, it happened when I was 11 years old. I was a child. It occurred in 1977 when especially any kind of mention of spiritual experience was stigmatized, and you were really shunned if you expressed any kind of adamance about spirituality or having the kind of experience I had. As well as that, I was brought up in the Catholic Church. Now, the Catholic Church is wonderful for many reasons, and I feel that they have so many spiritual things right, but one of the things that is to the detriment of Catholics is that they believe, to Catholicism I should say, not Catholics, is that Catholicism basically teaches that we don't have a direct relationship with Christ, that the church is there to be our intermediary, and that the hierarchy of the church is the way disciples or God's people are chosen. And another thing about the church is that it doesn't believe, it sort of really hammers home to us as children, this is what I remember about it very strongly, that we were born in sin and that we are sinful. And so this guilt complex really, hovers above us. But my near-death experience was showed me that I was, it was the complete opposite of that. I was not sinful and horrible and dirty and bad. I was God's beloved. I was loved by Jesus profoundly and unimaginably. I know that people really have a problem because of their own experiences to believe that kind of, this kind of profound, unconditional love can exist, and it's unfathomable to us as humans in this life. It's barely describable in words. There is language is quite a barrier to sharing what his love is like, and but I'll try. So at age 11, I was with my family. We were in the Mount Macedon Ranges. We'd gone for a picnic, and apparently the Mount Macedon Ranges are very spiritual people to the Indigenous Australians of the area. Very spiritual area. I think it's called, it has strong meridians, or ley lines or something. I don't quite know the terminology, but of course I didn't know any of that at age 11. I was running down a hill, running after the other children. I was last as usual. I had weak ankles as a child. So I was running to catch up with everybody, and fell on a rock, tripped on a rock. Instead of going with the impetus and falling down, I flung myself back and struck my head. Now, at the time when I'd flung myself back, I was expecting to feel a blow, but I didn't feel anything. I didn't feel my head being struck, or it was only later that I realised that I'd hit my right temple, and basically when I opened my eyes thinking, well, what's going on? I haven't felt any kind of pain. I was outside of my body and I was moving away from my body. I was being drawn through the air. I felt I did have a body. I could see everywhere. The vista of the Mount Macedon Ranges was just unbelievable. I got a glimpse of my body, but I didn't have so much of an interest. I was more interested in where I was going. My state of being at the time I would describe as being my pure essence, not having any kind of overlay of self, any kind of mind overlay. In psychology, they use terms like the id and the executive ego, and I was just absolutely no ego. I was purely my observer self, and as my observer self, I was just completely in the experience. I was not judging the experience. However, I did have later on, as I passed through the clouds, and I did feel a rush of cold as I passed through the clouds, and I was in a whiteout as I passed through the clouds. I realised that I did have feeling, sensation, and at that, after the clouds, I sort of experienced a form of trepidation, a glimpse of trepidation. And really from then on in my experience, I realised that whatever I thought of or whatever I felt, there was an immediate response. So as soon as I felt this trepidation and looked up thinking, well, how far am I going to go? This dark portal appeared and basically sucked me into it. Before I was more or less floating, being drawn up but floating, but now I was sucked in to this black portal. And I was in this portal that there was, this great sense of speed and whirring, and I was in this blackness, but as soon as again there was trepidation about the blackness and any kind of wonder, I looked up again and there was a light. And I realised that I was approaching this bright light. And at that realisation, I felt a great deal of relief. Also, a deal of familiarity, as though, oh, okay, yes, I've been, a kind of vague remembrance. I can't recall all of the aspects of remembrance, but there was definitely a remembering that I had done this before. And I guess this is the part that Christians really have a problem with. I've discovered that this is the part that Christians really have, my fellow brothers and sisters in Christ, have a problem with. And I'm really sorry about that, but I have to be authentic in telling my experience, because I don't believe that I was allowed to remember it so that I could, so that I would obscure it and make it palatable to fit into dogma. Certainly 99% of us who have had near-death experiences will tell you that it fits no dogma at all. But yeah, so back to my experience, I saw the light and I approached the light very, very quickly, and I felt a great sense of relief. And as the closer I came to the light, the more of a sense of love I felt, and optimism and bliss, and every beautiful, heart-filling I don't know, just a feeling emotion came to me. It just seemed to increase the closer I got, until I was out of the tunnel and sort of perpendicular to the light, and it was in a, the light seemed to be coming from a portal, a different portal, and I was in between the tunnel and the light. And I thought, well, no, I do want to go towards the light. So I began to step towards the light. And as I stepped towards, I saw somebody coming towards me from the light, out of the light. And the light was very bright, so it was difficult to make out. But the more I looked into, and tried to distinguish who was coming out, the more I could see the shape of a man. And as I distinguished that it was a man, I could see that he was in robes. And as he got closer to me, I could see his face and his hair and his beard. And suddenly I realized within myself that I was looking at Jesus Christ. Now, I think, it was a hang-up from my parents' socialism days, and my mother did pray with us every night about angels taking care of us, and I had, by that stage, learnt the Lord's Prayer, but I can't say that I was that enamoured by Jesus. In church I saw just this figure of a man on a cross, and for me as an 11-year-old child who, I just found that another extra burden to look at that. I didn't really realise deep in my heart what that meant, and I really didn't have any kind of feeling towards Jesus. I just felt that it was, the story of my religion. So when I saw him coming towards me, I was just in complete shock, and I felt inside of myself, I thought to myself, what could it be? Is that really who I think it is? It's Jesus Christ. And this realization came over me, and as the realization came over me, he projected a chuckle into me, and at that I realized that that he could read my mind and I could read his, and that was how he communicated that. So he came towards me, and without saying my name, I don't recall that he actually used my name, Pauline, but he called me to him. I think he used a name that started with T, and but I knew that it meant my child, mine, that I am his, that I come to me, you're mine, and with that he hugged me, and I was just imbued with his love. That was so overwhelming and strong that I immediately felt a sense of shame that I hadn't believed in him in the past. And with that feeling, as soon as I felt that shame, I fell to his feet. I found myself just at his beautiful feet and still feeling all of his love, and really, I can't describe to you what it's like, but I can't help reliving it either, so excuse any prolific gushing on my part. So I found myself at his feet, and I looked at his feet. They were in sandals. His white robe was a little bit above his ankle, and sort of showed a little bit of his shin, and his foot was just beautiful and perfect. And as I looked at it and realised the sandal, I saw a hole, and a light glowed at me through the hole. And upon seeing the light, I also, the realisation came to me that not only was he real, but the crucifixion was real. And now I was really humbled, and as soon as I realised the crucifixion was real. He imbued a little bit of knowledge, the confirmation that it was real, and just a little bit of the experience, to which all I could reply in my childish way was, does it still hurt? So, because the little bit of feeling that I got about the crucifixion was such suffering that I couldn't imagine that it would not hurt anymore, or that it wouldn't have caused him an injury. You have to remember, I was meeting him for the first time as an agnostic, and having a very intimate conversation with him, heart to heart or soul to soul. And as soon as I asked him if it still hurt, I was blinded by the light coming from his foot, and again I was in a whiteout of sorts, but it was sort of a goldy whiteout, and when I could see again, I was in a stony, dusty atmosphere. I was in a different realm. I was no longer in that space with him, and I was in a crowd on a cobbled streets and in stone buildings. It was very glary, and there was at this point I felt I didn't have a body. I could just feel everybody's vitriol in this big crowd of people. It was like a warring, there was like a war cry, and there's just so much hate and vitriol. It was very disturbing, so much so that out of that crowd, this light it was like I could feel the ultimate empathy, the ultimate form of empathy, and I could just feel this light of love emanating from this one woman who was standing a bit above the crowd, with her back against the wall. And she was an older woman. She was Palestinian. She had dark skin, and she was quite her face was quite lined, and she was covering her mouth and crying into her scarf, her headscarf. A tendril of black hair had fallen out, and she was just crying to herself, and I could feel everything from her. I could feel her profound love. I didn't know what she was crying about at that point. I could just feel her profound love, courage, this huge courage, inner courage that she was drawing on, and this inner faith and belief that was, but she was trembling, and she was hurting so very much. So when I had asked Jesus if it still hurt, he showed me that it still hurts in that way. It hurt his mother. And I think when he felt that I couldn't stand any more of that experience, he brought me back to him and into his light, which was just all joy and healing and love and positivity and love, just profound love. And so he comforted me after that, because it was a very difficult thing he'd shown me. And then he called me to come and sit next to him on a rock, and now I was conscious of my body, that I had a body again, and I sat on this rock to his left. He was to my right, and he just let me observe for a moment. I could see below me, my legs dangled, and there was just a nebula, a galaxy, just these colours of, just magnificent colours, sort of like the kind of things we see on Earth now with the auroras and aurora borealis and that kind of thing, but even more magnificent. And it was a galaxy, so we were I guess he was showing me that he was above the stars, he was above the galaxy, he reigned over this. He didn't tell me. So many things in my near-death experience were communicated in a different way, as well as the heart soul-to-soul communication. So he let me just take that in, and then he said to me, "Look here, my child," and he swept his right hand, and in the trace of his hand, suddenly his hand was huge in space and in the stars, and in the trace of the energy of his hand, a book appeared, a huge book, and he asked me to look in the book, and as I looked in the book, I could see it was like a, you know, those old-fashioned movies that sort of flicker, you know, and I saw a story unfold of two people loving this child, and they were just so beautiful. Everyone in this story was so beautiful that I didn't at all recognise that it was my life review, as I now know that they are called. I didn't have any expectations that I would be having a life review. Everything occurred in very much a moment-by-moment unfolding, as you might understand. Yeah, I'd never heard of a life review, of course. I thought he was just showing me some kind of story, and I just expected that I would just be with him forever, next to him, and he would be... I didn't know what to expect. I was just in the moment, but when I saw at which point this story, this realization came to me that it was my story, I understood immediately. I knew, he wants to send me back. And the moment I realized that it was my life was the moment that I saw a transgression that I had brought some sadness onto somebody. I'd really hurt them, and I didn't realize at the time. I thought that I was just acting in self-defense, and it was very much a tit-for-tat kind of childish exchange. But he showed me that, and that was when I realized, this is my life story. This is me. This is how God sees us. This is how God sees me. And then I turned around and asked him, well, knowing already that he was going to send me back. I don't want to go back, I told him. And I said, well, what's this life about? I don't understand the meaning of it all. And then he said, the meaning of life is to love. It's love. And I said, yes, but people don't live like that. I can't live like that alone when nobody else lives like that. You don't understand. And he just smiled at me, and as if, you know, he humoured me, you know. I said to Jesus, you don't understand. And with my childish arrogance. So, yeah, I began to get very distraught at the thought of leaving him, and I just pleaded. I just explained to him there was no love. I just couldn't. Now that I knew his love, I never wanted to be parted from his love. And he told me that he would always be with me, that I could always draw on his love. Admittedly, I forgot that. You know, even though I had the experience, I did let everybody else's authority over me. I let everybody have authority over me. And I did forget that the truth in that he was always with me. In fact, several times in my life when I really needed it, he showed me again that he was. So, but yeah, I just really clung to him and didn't want to be parted from him. And he told me about my free will. And he told me that, you know, my life could be beautiful if I would choose always to look through love. And he imparted that wisdom that I really had a lot of choice in the matter. I didn't really understand to what extent, you know, what that meant, that I could actually choose my thoughts, that I could choose my feelings and my focus. He really talked a lot about my focus. And so much so that even though he really, knew that I had to go back, instead of telling me, you must go back now, he basically told me to look in the book again, and he showed me a vision, an image of this beautiful young man. And as soon as I looked at this image, I knew that it was just the look that he loved me profoundly, this young man. Being an 11-year-old, I thought that it was my future husband. So I didn't really understand that it was in fact my son. I only recognised that when he was in his 20s and he was in the kitchen. He turned around and looked at me and said something, "Mum," and I caught the look of love in his eyes, and it dawned on me that he had shown me my son. He also showed me some other images of my life, and I just said to him, "Is this going to be this is a marvellous life?" And he said, "Yes, it is." And so I agreed to go back, and I said to him, "Well, look, nobody else knows about this. No one else believes that you are like this, and no one knows that life is about love. Should I tell them?" And again, I think there was 3 times that he laughed at me during my experience. My naivety, my childish ignorance and ego. And again he laughed at me and he said, "Yes, you should tell everybody." Of course, I thought that would be much easier than it was. So before I knew it, as soon as I'd agreed, basically, I was back. There was no more, any more sort of negotiating. I was back in my body. I was being licked. I was being awoken by the feeling of a licking. A beagle had come along from nowhere and was licking my temple. I had a really bad headache. As I opened my eyes, I could see the clouds forming in front of me as though they were pixelated. And then I heard from a distance, all these voices, and I came back into the consciousness of my earthly self. When everybody came to me, there was quite a panic, and I had a bit of liquid coming through my ears, and I didn't recognise anybody. My father swooped me up in his arms and took me straight away back to the camp, where they'd set up for the picnic, and put me in the back of the car. And I didn't recognise them, but as soon as I could, I told them all about my experience. They took me to a doctor, and they asked me to tell the doctor. And of course the doctor said, this is something that occurs when there's damage to the right temporal lobe, and it's brain damage, and we'll have to keep an eye on her for that. So I think my parents, really didn't want me to be stigmatised, and so it was strongly impressed upon me not to speak of it again. Of course, I could never forget it, and I hope, as long as it's taken for me to tell this testimony, I know it's been helpful to many people that I've told so far, and I've only really begun telling my testimony in earnest since 2015 to people personally. So I hope that this testimony blesses you. I hope that you can put aside all judgment and just hear and see that Jesus is real, and he really is with you. He wants a relationship with you, whether you're Catholic or whether you're Pentecostal or Protestant or Hindu. The thing that he really impressed upon me was that, it was his glory to die for everybody, and that he felt wonderful to have made that sacrifice. He impressed that upon me after I turned from seeing the sorrow of his mother. He impressed upon me that the whole world was saved, not just Catholics, but that if we believe on Him, we are saved. The whole world is saved through Him. I couldn't go back to church because it was so segregating, and I went along with what my parents wanted me to do, but this feeling of oneness I discovered in the philosophies, the Eastern philosophies, and that resonated, that this was something that Christ had shared with me during my encounter with Him. But not only that, He shared with me He was completely a man. He was not some kind of manifestation of my expectation. He was realer than real. He was the ultimate reality. But yes, I practiced Buddhism for a while because I wanted to feel that oneness that He had shown me. But when I spoke to the monks and I asked them, can I practice Buddhism and believe in Christ? And they said no. So at that stage, after all of my studies, I realized that, I wasn't ever going to find my answers in practicing with other people. I was only ever going to find my answers in a relationship with Christ. And I know that you will also find your answers if you practice and forge a relationship with Christ. And I hope this is a blessing to you, and that it impresses upon you that Christ is real. He saved the world. The world is saved. You are healed in Him, through Him. Believe in Him. Walk with Him. And be blessed, because you are.